Court. What was Donald Trump busy doing? He and his Department of Justice and Pam Bondi were busy doing a couple of things. One, using a grand jury to come up with a phony set of charges, apparently, against Abrego Garcia, now calling him a drug smuggler, a gun smuggler, a human being smuggler. Where was that when he was arrested and investigated under the Biden administration? Suddenly now, because Donald Trump's in office, he's all of those things? And even the things that she said at her press conference, Pam Bondi, on Friday, there's a mismatch, a disconnect between the things she says out loud at her press conference and the indictment. See, I like my attorneys general, when they take to a podium, to kind of stick to the script, stick to the indictment or the charging document or the press release about the charging document. I don't like freehand, freelance, extemporaneous conversation where you're violating the Department of Justice manual. You're violating your oath of office as a prosecutor. I don't care that the Florida bar decided that because Pam Bondi, you're currently a federal officer, they're not going to investigate whether you violated your oath of office or violated your oath of being a lawyer. You're a lawyer who's violated the Department of Justice manual. And so you stand in front of this assembled press corps and you lie to them. You say all of these things about the charges, and then when you look at the charges, and we've looked at the indictment closely, it's about 2 counts of smuggling. No co-conspirators mentioned, and no mention of the really to be the basis of the indictment. No mention of the drug smuggling, gun smuggling. She actually said during the press conference, 50 people have died in the last year because of a tractor trailer that tipped over and somehow Abrego Garcia was connected to it. Where's that in the indictment? Now you see why Ben Schrader, who was a long-term career prosecutor, more than 15 years in that office, resigned. And now, through a weird twist of fate, the acting U.S. attorney who actually signed the indictment is actually a Democrat who never really wanted the job. There were 2 other people that, one guy resigned right away as soon as Trump won, and one guy resigned after a couple of months. A guy named Jaworski, leaving the acting U.S. attorney in the hands of a Democrat. So he had to sign the indictment. He didn't have the brass ones that Ben Schrader had to resign. So now they got the phony May 21st. We sort of missed it. In these kind of random filings in places like Tennessee, we didn't really catch it that they had filed that. Because then if we had known that, it would have been easy to connect the dots. They were going to use the phony indictment to try to use it as a way to extradite formal requests from one government to the other to have somebody released to face charges in the United States. So now they're using this phony extradition as cover for their trying to get out from under the ultimate contempt findings that are coming down the road very quickly with Judge Zinnes. Let me play a clip from the press conference where Todd Blanche basically connects the dots for us. Let's play the clip.
In your mind, does this resolve that issue in terms of his deportation? And should this be seen in any way as complying with the judge's order to return him to the U.S. and the Supreme Court ruling that the U.S. government should facilitate his return?
There's a big difference between what the state of play was before the indictment and after the indictment. And so the reason why he is back and was returned was because there's an arrest warrant, which was presented to the government in El Salvador. So there's a big difference there. As far as whether it makes the ongoing litigation in Maryland moot, I would think so, but we don't know that. He just landed today.
And now we've got the new reporting, and so you want to know what's going on there in that timeline. I want to kind of give you that timeline. The first thing that's going on is they filed a motion with the magistrate judge, Judge Holmes, Barbara Holmes, who handles at the federal court level in districts like this. They handle most of the day-to-day justice and administration of a criminal case is really done by the magistrate judge. So the magistrate judge is entertaining whether to release him or not. The government, of course, has said he's a flight risk. He's a flight risk. Yeah, if you shackle him and throw him on a plane and send him to El Salvador, yeah, he might get out of the country. But there's no other suggestion that he is a flight risk. Even the crimes that he's alleged to have committed are all in the United States. They're all in, between Maryland and Tennessee kind of thing. So I don't get the flight risk part. And I'm sure his lawyers will fight hard to get him released in order to give them maximum cooperation for his defense and the ultimate motion to dismiss the indictment. Now, my gut is he's going to stay in detention. Yeah. Given the combination of his immigration status with his criminal indictment, as phony as it looks, I think they're going to keep him in detention. But his lawyers will have access to him at the Federal Detention Center to try to mount a defense. The timeline here of how we got here, I think, is very important. I kind of want to end the hot take on the timeline. There's a website called Working Immigrants, which did a really great job of putting together the timeline through really now of what happened. March 12th, it's hard to believe it's only March, 2025, Abrego Garcia is pulled over driving his car by ICE personnel, taken into custody. On March 15th, even though they know that he has an order of non-removal to El Salvador, knowing that, they put him on a plane to El Salvador's CCOT prison. March 24th, 12 days later, after she spots his video of him being loaded into that prison, Abrego Garcia's spouse, an American citizen in Maryland, sues the government in U.S. District Court in Maryland. Judge Zinnes is assigned to have him return. So this whole saga really starts ticking on March the 12th, and then a demand on March the 24th for his return. On March 31st, a week later, a lawyer no longer with the Department of Justice honestly tells Judge Zinnes that Abrego Garcia should not have been sent to El Salvador and that it was a mistake. April 4th, Judge Zinnes issues her ruling to facilitate his return from El Salvador in the interest of due process rights and the Constitution. There is an appeal. It goes up to the United States Supreme Court. On April the 10th, the U.S. Supreme Court 9-0 rules that Zinnes is right and can order his return to the United States in the interest of due process. So he gets picked up on the 12th. Less than a month later, the Supreme Court says, bring him back. And we've been dealing with the bring him back order ignored by the Trump administration ever since. Zinnes amends her order on April the 14th, 4 days after the Supreme Court rules. Trump meets with President Bukele in the White House, in which they taunt everybody and basically say they're never bringing Abrego Garcia back. Bukele says, I'll never smuggle a terrorist back into the United States. The next day, Judge Zinnes criticizes the government's failure to respond to her rulings and the Supreme Court rulings, and she grants expedited discovery to get to the bottom of whether they are in contempt of court. The Fourth Circuit supports Judge Zinnes twice in the middle of April in two major rulings. And then we move into May. May 21st, instead of returning him after the judge had been informed a week or two earlier that they were working on his return, May 21st, they get the indictment before a grand jury on 2 counts. And then on June 6th, as Judge Zinnes is considering and had already ordered the Abrego Garcia lawyers to file a motion for contempt, they announce his return and his extradition on gun, drug, and smuggling charges, but really only smuggling charges. That's how we got here. So if anybody doesn't think that the phony extradition route by way of a criminal court filing isn't a ruse, just listen to what I played for you for Todd Blanche and look at the timeline. It's obvious. And look at the fact that Ben Schrader gave up his entire career, went back to private practice and teaching at Vanderbilt instead of working for the Trump administration over it. Profile and Courage. You're a Profile and Courage. You're here with us every week, every hour on the Midas Touch Network and on Legal AF. Join me on Legal AF. Hit the subscribe button there as we continue to grow that pro-democracy channel. Join me here on Midas Touch, where I do hot takes like this about twice a day right here on the Midas Touch Network. Come over to Legal AF, the Substack, where we post all of these filings for you to get your hands on. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we